And now it is my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Beverly Jenkins. Beverly Jenkins is a USA Today best-selling author and a prestigious writer of African-American historical romance fiction. She specializes in 19th century African-American life and has over 30 published novels to date. She has received numerous awards and has also been featured in many national publications. Please join me in welcoming Beverly Jenkins.
This is a big-ass room. Yeah, I know I'm not going to behave, right? I want to thank, first of all, I want to thank the board of Romance Writers of America for inviting me to speak to my tribe. You guys, most of you know I've had a hell of a month the last month. And coming here, getting the love, recharges me, fuels me, and fills my heart. So thank you all for that. It's bright up here, too. Those of you who've heard me speak before, you know that I always begin my talks by thanking African-American abolitionist Maria W. Stewart. She was born in Hartford, Connecticut in 1803, left an orphan at the age of 5, and bound out in service to the family of a clergyman. So she became an indentured servant at the age of 5. But on September 12, 1832, she gave an anti-slavery speech before the African-American Female Intelligence Society of Boston and became the first American woman of any race to speak publicly before a promiscuous audience. Now, 19th century promiscuous does not mean the same as 21st century promiscuous. That promiscuous meant a group of mixed gender groups. So men and women were not allowed to speak to a mixed gender crowd. So anytime you're female and you get on the mic, you can thank Maria W. Stewart, okay? Okay, this is going to be like a 3-part kind of sandwich kind of thing. I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of African American romance. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about me. And then I'm going to give you some advice. And then I'm going to let you out of here. My stuff is always short and sweet, just like me. Slave narratives were the first instrument used by African Americans to tell their own stories. So if I want to speak about the history of African American romance, I have to begin there. The earliest narrative I found was this one, published in 1760, and it's memorable for its length of title. So check out this title. It's by Britton Hammond, a narrative of the uncommon sufferings and surprising deliverance of Britton Hammond, a Negro man, servant to General Winslow of Marshfield in New England, who returned to Boston after having been absent almost 13 years, containing an account of the many hardships he underwent from the time he left his master's house in the year 1747 to the time of his return to Boston, how he was cast away in the Capes of Florida, the horrid cruelty and humane barbarity of the Indians in murdering the whole ship's crew, the manner of his being carried by them into captivity. Also, an account of his being confined 4 years and 7 months in a closed dungeon, and the remarkable manner in which he met with his good old master in London, who returned to New England a passenger in the same ship. Try putting that on a spine or in an Amazon search. Okay, that's 1760 by a publisher, Green and Russell, who are no longer, which is probably a good thing. But narratives by women don't show up until almost a half a century later in 1831 with Mary Prince, a West Indies-born slave whose dictated story became the first published account in Great Britain of a black woman's life. And the title of that is much smaller. The History of Mary Prince, a West Indian slave, related by herself with a supplement by the editor, to which is added the narrative of Asa Asa, a captured African, published in London in 1831. Now, we in America, when we think about slavery, we have a tendency to think cotton. And maybe indigo, if you've read my indigo. Shh. We rarely think about salt. I had no idea that slaves were used to harvest salt in the West Indies. So here's a short excerpt from Mary Prince's book. She was 14. I was immediately sent to work in the salt water with the rest of the slaves. This work was perfectly new to me. I was given a half barrel and a shovel and had to stand up to my knees in the water from 4 o'clock in the morning until 9, when we were given some Indian corn boiled in water, which we were obliged to swallow as fast as we could for fear the rain would come and melt the salt. We were then again called to our tasks and worked through the heat of the day, the sun flaming upon our heads like fire and raising salt blisters in those parts which were not completely covered. Our feet and legs from standing in the salt water for so many hours became full of dreadful boils, which eat down in some cases to the very bone, afflicting the sufferers with great torment. We came home at 12, ate our corn soup called blolly as fast as we could, and went back to our employment until dark at night. We then shoveled up the salt in large heaps and went down to the sea, where we washed the pickle from our limbs and cleaned the barrels and shovels from the salt. When we returned to the house, our master gave us each our allowance of raw Indian corn, which we pounded in a mortar and boiled in water for our suppers. We slept in a long shed, divided into narrow slips like the stalls used for cattle. Boards fixed upon stakes driven into the ground without mat or covering were our only beds. On Sundays, after we had washed the salt bags and done other work required, we went to the bush and cut the long, soft grass, of which we made trusses for our legs and feet to rest upon, for they were so full of the salt boils that we could get no rest lying upon the bare boards. Her story was published as calls for the abolition of slavery were on the rise. And it moved so many people that the book sold out 3 printings that first year. Little is known about her after the printings, other than that 3 lawsuits were filed as a result of the book, and that she was asked to testify at all 3 trials. One suit being brought by the master of the salt ponds, who said he was defamed. And he eventually won the suit. No justice, no us, right? Prince was followed by such notable women as Sojourner Truth, Harriet Jacobs, Old Elizabeth, a colored minister whose autobiography was from 1776 to 1866, and Sylvia Dubois, who wrote her biography or autobiography at 116 years old. And the title is A Biography of the Slave Who Whipped Her Mistress and Gained Her Freedom. So we as a race began telling first our stories of bondage and then of escape, and the most famous is the narrative of Henry Box Brown, who escaped from slavery enclosed in a box 3 feet long and 2 feet wide when he mailed himself to freedom. So how and where does romance fit into these narratives of telling our own stories? They begin with the optimism that the race embraced after the Civil War. The abolition of slavery brought sweeping changes not only to the 3 million people who'd been held captive against their will in the South, but changes for a nation that saw a black governor and black lieutenant governor in Louisiana, integrated legislatures in places like Florida, Mississippi, Georgia, and South Carolina, 2 U.S. senators from Mississippi, of all places, and 21 black congressmen from all over the South from 1870 to 1901. We were optimistic about everything from education to owning our own businesses, and the HEA was pursued by men who spent months and even years walking from plantation to plantation across the South, looking for their wives sold away by slavery. These days also brought hope that the country would live up to the promises stated in the Constitution, and that we as a race would get our HEA, but it didn't happen. When Reconstruction died in 1876, ushering in the hateful, bloody years of redemption, hope began to falter. But ironically, black women like Frances Ellen Watkin Harper and Pauline Hopkins held on to the hope and became 2 of the race's first romance writers. Their stories were based on what scholars call the Victorian love plots and marriage plots, and they came complete with HEAs. I was surprised to learn that Harper had written one of these earliest romance novels, and it's called Iola Leroy, or Shadows Uplifted, because she is more remembered for being a poet, a lecturer, and one of the most fiery speakers ever for abolition. Her poem, Bury Me in a Free Land, is one of the most iconic poems of the pre-Civil War era. It was read at almost every anti-slavery meeting, at churches and funerals. It was taped on the walls of African-American homes and memorized by African-American school children all over the quasi-free South, North. Harper's romance, Iola, was published in 1892 and had a really convoluted plot. Our heroine, Iola, is a light-skinned, blue-eyed woman who doesn't realize she's black. She and her mother are sold into slavery. It's lots of drama. She embraces who she is racially and ends up being a nurse during the Civil War. She eventually falls in love with a black doctor. They find their HEA, and both continue to devote their lives to uplifting the race. Dr. Bill Gleason, who teaches English at Princeton and is a romance scholar, says this: the last paragraph is something like, now the shadows were lifted off the hero and the heroine, and they're blessed and can be a blessing to each other. Gleason goes on to say that Harper has a note at the end of the story that basically says, oh, by the way, the mission of this book is to give people faith that this can really happen. Sounds a bit like what we tell our readers today. So now this is 1892. The situation for the race has become more and more dire. Jim Crow is everywhere. Blacks are being lynched, disenfranchised, and denied the right to vote. In 1896, the Supreme Court hands down the ruling on Plessy versus Ferguson, and by a 7-1 decision, makes the separate but equal doctrine the law of the land. Yet in 1900, Pauline Hopkins continued to hold on to the hope and optimism that fueled Harper's Iola, and writes a romance called Contending Forces. She goes on to write books in 1901, '02, and '03, but each of these has a tragic ending. Why? Well, scholar Claudia Tate says in her book, Domestic Allegories of Political Desire, Hopkins gave up on romance because the optimism was gone. The race's last hope of an HEA from America was dashed on the rocks by Plessy versus Ferguson ruling, and what little bit of optimism we had dried up like rain in a desert. But yet our HEAs continued off-page. We were still courted and adored by our men. We married, had children, built colleges because white institutions refused us entry. We founded towns and continued to make as much lemonade as we could out of the lemons America kept giving us. We won't see any more mass market type romance on page again until the 1930s, when the widely circulated black newspaper, the Pittsburgh Courier, ran a series called The Dark Knight, K-N-I-G-H-T. It's about a young black man from Montana who, after the death of his mother, travels to Chicago and meets the beautiful and wealthy Lila Durant. And after much drama, events, and separations, the two marry and live out their lives with the HEA. Now, I could go on for another 40 minutes about all the stereotypes the series shot down, from blacks homesteading in Montana to blacks being incapable of romantic love to the wealth held by blacks when the country thought every black person alive was illiterate and impoverished, but I won't. You can read my books instead. Yes, that's a shameless plug. All right, just a little bit more ways to go here. Stay with me. In 1984, Sandra Kitt broke the ceiling in mainstream publishing by becoming the first African-American woman to write for Harlequin. Her novels, Adam and Eva and The Rites of Spring, are classics of the romance canon. And when Letitia Peoples founded Odyssey Books in the early 90s, authors like Brenda Jackson, Donna Hill, Rochelle Allers, and the late, great Frances Ray and others were given a chance to tell their stories for the first time. And thanks to the forward thinking of Mr. Walter Zacharias, who founded Arabesque as the African-American imprint of Kensington, these same women would go on to become icons in the romance industry. So now here we are in the 21st century, and we have gone from slave narratives to African-American women telling their stories in all the subgenres of romance: historicals, contemporary, paranormal, interracial, and we are a better industry for that. So if anyone ever tells you African-American romance has no history or place in the genre, you now know better, okay? Okay. On June 3rd, 1993, my husband and I were having a hell of a fight. It's one of those fights where you following each other up and down the steps and the neck is rocking and the hand is rolling. Y'all all been there. And the phone rang. It was Ellen Edwards from Avon Books saying she wanted to buy my book, The Call. So I told my husband, I said, well, I just sold my book. After we called time out on the fight. To this day, I have no idea what we were fighting about. Probably something bullshit, I don't know, you know. But I said, I just sold my book. Hey, so I guess I'll take your little ass to dinner then, huh? And I was like, yeah. I was like, yeah, you do. So I have been with Avon for 23 years. And on this journey, I've been blessed to have known and been influenced by some amazing people. All of my editors, from Ellen Edwards to Christine Zika to Cecilia O to Monique Patterson, and for the past 15 years or so, Erica Sang. My Avon editors get my books. They've all made me a better writer and have been a joy to work with. Thank you. Thank you, Pam, Spangler, Jaffe, the brilliant queen of Avon publicity. Thank you. Thank you, Adrian DiPietro, former head of Avon Marketing, who I met smoking at a conference in Dallas, and who picked me out of the mid-list author slush pile and set me on the path that brought me to you today. Also at my table is Ruth Ryan. And I'm going to try and do this without crying. Ruthie I met at my very first signing. And she was so gracious and so kind. When a lot of established authors literally turned their backs on me. Ruthie has always, always been in my corner, and I love you so much. Thank you. Liat, thank you. Big shout out to my first agent, Vivian Stevens. I need a tissue, as the old people say. And to my current forever agent, Nancy Yost. She and I have been together since 1996. And like romance, she is the shit. We were both 12 at the time, of course. And she is the real deal. Also at my table are Farah, who's over there. Thank you for your support, and to the board, and to Ceresia Glass, who is a force of nature in her own right. Thank you, baby. Okay. Now, where are we? Page 7. Okay. Over the years, I've learned some things doing this. And one of the things that I've learned is that the only thing you as a writer can control is what you write. Not marketing, not distribution, hell, in some cases, not even the title. But don't stop writing. I've also learned, here comes the hard part, some people, African American is not a genre. Hey, if I don't say this, who's going to say it, right? The young women writing African American romance should be in the damn romance section. Not in the blue light section next to titles such as Pimptress, Secrets of a Side Bitch, and For the Love of a Hood Chick. It's about discoverability. How are romance readers going to find them if publishers and booksellers don't care enough to make sure they are marketed correctly? This ensures low sales and fulfills the stereotype that black romance doesn't sell. I am invisible, understand, simply because you refuse to see me, is a quote from Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man. Stop refusing to see AA romance as the moneymaker it can be. A recent Pew Research Center survey found that the person most likely to read a book is a black woman with 2 years of college. Hello? Do better, publishers and booksellers, do better. And for those who feel intimidated by this or think that bringing more diversity of all kinds to the table will somehow negatively affect their career or push them off the stage, it won't. I promise. Romancelandia's table is very large. There's enough light, silverware, plates, tables, and chairs for everyone. And for all of us, don't be intimidated by those who write in other genres. We're all using the same 26 letters of the alphabet. We spin them our way, they spin them their way. Number 4, you can write with children in your life. Find the time, make the time. Let your kids know this is work. When I was growing up, I had 2 kids. And I would tell them, Mama is going to work. I wasn't saying, well, I'm going to go write a book now, honey. Or, can you leave Mommy alone so that she can work on the typewriter? Tell your damn kids this is work. And if you have to pay them to leave you the hell alone, pay them. I used to give my kids, well, when I started making some money, I used to give my kids a little bit of royalty money so that they would leave me alone. Now they're 36 and 30, and I still give them a piece of the royalty check because they're good to their mothers. So pay your kids to leave you alone. Number 5, get a Facebook page. Get on Twitter. Build yourself an online community. I am a walking, talking, sometimes cursing example that Facebook can increase your sales. If you're a Luddite or too shy, too bad. Get over yourself and get out there. No one else is going to sell your pizza for you. Okay? Number 6. You can't have someone else's blessings. You can't. Number 7, when folks ask you if you've done all the naughty things you write about in your books, look them straight in the eye and say, hell yeah. They aren't going to believe you if you say no, so you might as well say yeah. Number 8, treat your readers like the precious jewels that they are. When the ducats begin rolling in, your readers are the ones who will help pay your mortgage. They will help put your kids through college and help pay for the repairs to the Honda Accord 6 that you tore up while you were on the road. Number 9, don't hate your editor. She's there to make your book better, at least most of the time. Granted, they are not the all-seeing Oz that they sometimes think they are, but 8 times out of 10, they know what they're talking about. So give her a fair hearing, okay? Number 10, you're a grown-ass woman or a man. Quit crying to your agent about stuff she can't control. Remember rule number 1. She's there to go to bat for you and make the crooked ways straight, not to listen to you whine on the phone every 3 days about how wrong the universe is doing you. Number 11, when you get that fat contract, don't gloat. Karma is only a bitch if you are. Yeah, I didn't know I did stand-up, did you? Okay, I had a whole lot. I mean, this was long, but I just cut it to 12 because otherwise, we'll be here all day. Number 12. Lastly, don't be afraid to kill people who annoy you in your books. I had a girlfriend who was going through an incredibly terrible divorce, and she said, "Can you kill him for me?" And I said, "Sure." So I killed him in the Second Blessings book. I had him picked up by a tornado and dropped body down onto a picket fence. Yeah, I wasn't playing with him. And he's dead, and he's still walking around. He don't even know he's dead. He's still walking around. All right. This is how we're going to end this. You're a writer. Claim the title. Writers write, so make time for it every day. Set realistic goals. Embrace the ecstasy of writing. Read, 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 read. Follow your heart, not the market. Don't just start stories. Finish them. Dream big. Learn the rules. Follow the rules. Break the rules. Constructive criticism. Solicit. Accept. Manage. Put your ego in your pocket and sit on it. Writing is a journey, not a destination. Enjoy the scenery. Give back to the writing community. Write scared. Remember, you are the master of inspiration, not its slave. Set your stories free. Send them out into the world. Don't slack on the hard stuff. Outline, research, rewrite. Build a lifestyle that nurtures and supports your writing. Love what you do. Write with joy. And to paraphrase the great Beyonce, keep writing, because a writer don't quit on herself.
Just a quick reminder that the annual general meeting will be in this room at 4:30. We'd love to see you here. And also tonight there will be a screening at 8 o'clock of the Love Between the Covers documentary. So hope to see you there also. And everyone have a great day and enjoy the conference.